If you have yet to do your blue chip ratio calculation, don't worry. It's just really high. That's good enough. Well, welcome into the Voice of College Football and our Buckeye show that we present each and every week. This week on a Thursday. That's why you subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Appreciate these three being here for a 261st time. Just a shade past 5 years, folks. That's Steve Hellwagon right next to me. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony Girdman down below there at Buckeye Huddle. And, of course, the podcast is Buckeye Weekly. Kevin Noon, BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. And it's the Big Me podcast. Good stuff. Good to see you guys. Let's go right into it, Tony. Of course, after the shock subsided over the departure to Michigan, of course, there was a running backs coach role to fill, and it's been filled by a Big Ten rival coach here with Carlos Locklyn coming in from Oregon.
Yeah, you lose a coach to a Big Ten rival, so what do? You go grab a coach from a Big Ten rival. Ohio State, Ryan Day's been doing that lately. Of course, Chip Kelly, and now going and getting Carlos Locklyn from Oregon, who has a pretty interesting story. He's only been a position coach in college football for 3 years now. First year was 2021 at Western Kentucky, I believe, and then 2 years at Oregon. But what I found most interesting, we talked to a couple of running backs on Wednesday, Quinshon Judkins and Dallan Hayden, is everybody's had previous relationships with them. They knew the guy. I believe Quinshon said that Locklyn offered him at Oregon, and then Dallan Hayden said he's known him for a while because Hayden is from Memphis, and Locklyn was at the University of Memphis in like a high school liaison capacity and also like a volunteer capacity. So he knew him from that time. So there won't be so much getting to know you. There'll be a little, obviously, but they already know the guy. So I think that's pretty interesting. But Ryan Day said, I think they interviewed like 7 guys for the job, and they considered several others, but ultimately it comes down to Carlos Locklyn, and ultimately it comes down to Oregon maybe not paying him enough to keep him based on what happened to all of the other running backs coaches that Ohio State was interested in. They made a bunch of people a bunch of money, and so Locklyn will make more money and also get to do it in Columbus, which is obviously a much better place than Eugene, Oregon. I mean, come on.
That storyline sounds kind of familiar, that situation. Guy not getting paid enough, moves on. Okay. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, everything that I've read and heard about Carlos Locklyn seems very positive. Very imposing figure standing there. I mean, he's built like a tank, it looks like. And so he's going to provide an example for how his guys, he played running back at Chattanooga, which I believe is FCS. And then was in Memphis for a while at 4 different high schools, served as a coach there, then moved on to University of Memphis, as Tony said, has only been an on-field full-time assistant coach at the FBS level for 3 years, 1 at Western Kentucky and 2 at Oregon. So this guy has got a rocket strapped to his back going up the food chain and passing a lot of people who've been doing this for a very long time. But there's got to be some rhyme or reason to this. And I think, obviously, again, this is a case where Chip Kelly and his ties back to UCLA and going against Oregon and knowing and understanding, what the personnel were at those other schools that he was going against, he had to at least be aware of what Carlos Locklyn was doing at Oregon to know that he would be a good fit for Ohio State. So gets him back into this hemisphere, quasi east of the Mississippi, I guess. And Memphis, sits right on the Mississippi, so I guess you'd say that. But he'll be connected with this entire region. I mean, really, all the way down to Florida, I would think, with contacts and people and different ways to recruit running backs. So I think it's going to be a positive thing. As Tony said, deceptively well connected. I mean, as you'd say it, because again, he was also at Florida State for a year or two, I believe, in the interim before he went to Western Kentucky. So he's been around a lot of different places and worn a lot of different hats. And seems like now is the time in his late 30s that he's coming into his own as a college football assistant coach. And Ohio State's going to get some of the best years out of Carlos Locklyn, it looks like.
Yeah, let's not undersell his time at Florida State. I mean, albeit it wasn't a long time, but director of high school outreach, which is important because Tony Alford was Ohio State's area recruiter for a good part of the state of Florida. So you want somebody who is familiar with the landscape there, and if you're a coach that's worth anything, you're recruiting the state of Florida. You know where St. Thomas Aquinas is, you know where IMG Academy is, you know where Tampa Jesuit is, you know where these schools are, but having relationships already in place is never going to be a bad thing. I think that it's a very interesting hire. I mean, it's going to be maybe a little bit of a change in just in tenor of the messaging. I think that I think Tony Alford was a little bit more of a let me get my arms around you and let's hug it out. I think that Carlos Locklyn probably has a little more of an edge to him. And this doesn't mean necessarily an adversarial type of thing, but I think if you're screwing up, you're gonna hear about it, and it'll be interesting to see how all of these pieces fit together. But to Tony's point about making a lot of coaches a lot of money out there, I was talking to a writer out in Oregon who said that at one point Carlos Locklyn was like the lowest paid Power 5 assistant coach out there. Oregon brought him up to $400,000 in this latest deal that he'd signed. Word on the street, I've not seen any documents yet, is that he's going to be making like $650 at Ohio State. So to Steve's point, meteoric rise is right, and I think Ohio State is still getting in pretty much on the ground floor with him.
One of the interesting things
I'll throw in that one of our writers from a 24/7 site at Oregon passed on is that he calls himself the walk-on coach, which basically all these other coaches, are basically on scholarship, earned their way to this job or whatever, or were hand chosen for all these different positions that they have. But he's the walk-on who had to earn his scholarship as an assistant coach at college football, is kind of how he views it, with a chip on his shoulder that he's going to do it better, faster, stronger, meaner than everybody else. And he demands excellence out of his position group, wants them to be the best position group on the team as well. So that's the holding guys to high standards. You're never going to get low marks from me for that. So a guy who's actually going to coach the players, not that Tony Alford didn't, but that's a good sign for me.
Yeah, a guy who had been like a coordinator in high school, offensive coordinator, and then basically volunteered in the weight room at Memphis, I believe, for a year, and then was elevated to like a high school liaison, and then went with Mike Norvell to Florida State in that same kind of role, and gradually grew into a position coach. And with his background, he's originally from Alabama, and spent a lot of time in Memphis, went to Florida State, has been in Oregon. And if you look at the 4 running backs that he landed in terms of got committed to him at Oregon, they came from Mississippi, Tennessee, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. So this is a wide, mass of land that he's been around. And so I do expect him to get back into Florida in the Southeast. And even when he was the 1 year at Western Kentucky, he got a 3-star running back from Alabama. So like he's got that footprint and that experience. So I think that will bode well, but also he doesn't like the notion of recruiting coaches. And we've talked in the past about the running backs coach being mainly a recruiter. He does not like that. He does not like coaches that just recruit. He's talked about this, where he has said that the running back position is the worst coach position in football. And he just the notion of you just recruit the best guys and let them go. Like he doesn't kind of respect that type of coach. And so he's pretty hands-on. Yesterday was his first day at practice for the Buckeyes and was just pretty intent on watching more than getting after the players at that point, because he's obviously looking to see what they've got and what he has to deal with. So the feedback wasn't overflowing yesterday. I'm sure it will start tomorrow with their next practice, though.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tony, Locklyn had a good group to work with there at Oregon. I don't know how much he had to do with bringing in Bucky Irving, the Minnesota running back, who had a big year with over 1,000 yards last year, but also while he's off to the NFL, Jordan James, 11 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry last year, and Noah Whittington are the two guys that the Buckeyes are going to have to deal with in early October in Eugene that he recruited and signed as well there at Oregon. Those numbers fresh in my head from our Big Ten running backs ratings and rankings. If you want to take a look at those, you may be happy with the top two. Yes. All right. And as our guy Jordan is saying right here, Kevin, Tony, I asked you guys to put in a good word for me to Ryan Day. How come I didn't get the call for the running backs coach job?
Can't recruit.
Can't coach.
Other than that,
sorry, Jordan.
Appreciate it, Jordan.
I was going to say Tony set that one up for me. I just had to. Sorry, I had to take you. I saw the shot and I took it. You took it and broke a major rule of engagement. He did another thing with that circus stunt flyby.
Well, that'll cover the flybys.
Yakov. Always appreciate Yakov being here. Thank you so much for that. Yakov, always connecting the past with the present here. Your Eclipse viewing plans, ? And then we've got Jeremiah Smith to Randy Moss. Good comp? Hopefully.
I'll just say that there was an eclipse in 1994 of some sort, and where I was at in Urbana, Ohio, it was cloudy. I couldn't really see it. So it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Monday, possibly going down to my sister-in-law's in Hamilton, which is right in the path of this thing. But there's also a chance that we may have interviews at Ohio State on Monday with Coach Day and Carlos Locklyn. So we're either doing that Monday or Wednesday. When one of the OSU people who works there found out that they were possibly doing interviews on Monday, he almost panicked. He was like, the eclipse is on Monday. Like we couldn't possibly conduct regular operations on Monday. There's an eclipse on Monday. And I was like, whatever. So,
Apparently, Sandusky is one of the places to be. It's one of the main pending weather conditions.
Yeah.
One of the main spots.
Go watch it from the like a Ferris wheel at Cedar Point or something like that. I'm sure there'll be nobody there. I'm sure that parking lot will be wide open. Just go and park and put some lawn chairs up. I'm not planning on anything. Steve, you mentioned the one back in the 90s. I was on a high school field trip for that one, I believe, and we were at a Greek Orthodox church, and we weren't allowed to go outside and watch it because it would have been disrespectful to the priest. So we just got to experience it from inside the church as things got dark, and
wow,
the priest was talking about something. Then we had one a few years back that was sort of impressive, but nothing like this. So I'm not going to try to get into any traffic. That's not that's not on my list.
Me either.
I don't even remember the 94 one. I was either in Columbus still in school, if it were later in the year, or I was in Atlanta doing my internship. The one that Tony just mentioned, I was actually out at the airport. There was a little brewery out there that's no longer in business. And I think between like 10 of us that were there, we had like one pair of glasses. So I'm just like, whatever. I'm just happy to be drinking beer.
I did watch that one. I like the parking lot of the Canes on campus, just off campus, but I was watching it through the reflection in the car next to me. So I was like in the paint job, I was watching it reflected so I could see it because you're not supposed to stare directly at it. So the way I consider it is like what Perseus did in Clash of the Titans when he was able to look at Medusa. That's how I watched the Eclipse on that one.
These guys are the storytellers. I have absolutely no Eclipse stories to tell. I do not remember any of them. Sorry, we will move on from there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that a lot of people have... Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I was going to say in terms of the Jeremiah Smith to Randy Moss comparisons, seeing him in person on Saturday, I got more Calvin Johnson vibes than Randy Moss because they're two physically different people. Randy Moss is a skinnier kind of guy. There's nothing skinny about Jeremiah Smith. He's listed at 6'3", 215. He looks bigger than that. He looks taller than that. He's just physically a mismatch. Whereas Randy Moss
playing bigger than that.
Yeah, Randy Moss is athletically a mismatch, and not just because he played at Marshall. He was a mismatch when he played at Florida State and Notre Dame for 3 practices or whatever. But Jeremiah Smith is more. If you want to throw Hall of Fame wide receiver names at him, which is totally responsible, I would say more Calvin Johnson than Randy Moss.
Definitely not Hunter Renfrow. That would not be a good comp. I'll go that far. Okay. Appreciate that, Yakov. We have had requests through the years to have people challenge me in college football trivia. We had more of those this week. Therefore, we're going to go live at noon. I'm just going to show up. Somebody else is going to host a show and toss me college football trivia questions against whomever wants to show up. So we're going to be on the Big 12 channel directly following this show, and I'm going to answer questions for a half hour. So if that excites you, then please join us, or mildly interests you in any way, shape, or form. All right. A big haul for the Buckeyes over the weekend in recruiting. Kevin, we'll start with you. And Deshaun Stewart, a top 30 safety in the country. He's got a buddy coming with him from DePaul Catholic out of New Jersey.
Yeah, Wayne, New Jersey, big deal there. Getting a couple guys from the same school. Talked to a buddy of mine who covers recruiting in that part of the country, who feels that Deshaun Stewart is criminally underrated. 6'1", 6'2", $185, $190 type of guy. Can play multiple positions in the secondary, coming in as a safety, but has been told by Ohio State that they will look at him in multiple positions. Obviously, when you are running a 4-2-5, and we know where the 5 is, that is, having versatility is very important because of the fact of if you can only play one position and the guy ahead of you on the depth chart isn't coming off the field, then what the hell are we doing here? But I think he's a big get. And again, you mentioned he's teammates with Desi Jones, Dez, and I see him as the natural answer to the decommitment of Jevin Boggs, the kid out of Cocoa, Florida. People are going to be concerned that, well, does this mean that Ohio State is less confident in Jamie French or some of these other guys, as the dog will not leave me alone? No, I think Ohio State, just based on the numbers in the wide receiver room, is going to have to take a big class. You lose guys like Noah Rogers along the way. You lose Julian Fleming along the way. And because of that, you do need to bring more guys in. You look at the star total in the wide receiver room, you're like, oh, well, they're fine. Well, we know this is the end of the line for Emeka Egbuka after the season. We're going to be getting toward the end of the line for some more guys. So there's the necessity there. So I think both of these guys out, just to lump them together, I think it was a huge get for what really was an exciting 4 days of Ohio State recruiting to get, 4 blue chip type of players.
Yeah. The Jones, I'm with you, Kevin. He's a slot guy. So that takes the Boggs thing and puts him there. The Stewart, he's playing corner, could play safety, and in the Ohio State defense, if you're going to play one safety, you kind of need to be able to play all 3 safeties. So if you're bringing in a corner, that's kind of an ideal fit for that. Like a Jordan Hancock, formerly a corner, plays nickel, can still play corner. And that corner or that nickel position in Ohio State's defense, if the offense shifts, then that nickel moves to a deep safety. So you have to be able to handle that. And the strong safety, if there's a shift, becomes that slot guy. So And we know Caleb Downs has been playing some in the slot. He's been playing some of all three of the safety positions. So if you can get a 6'2", 190-pound corner that can do those things, and then you got to try it, and you bring in as many as you can each year. And same thing at receiver, because they brought in 2 guys last year and they were trying for 4. So that's you hit on half of the ones you wanted. So you need to catch up on that. And you lost a guy to 2 guys to the portal, but Noah Rogers specifically, and you've lost 2 of your 4 guys in 2022 to the portal, and they have yet to do anything. So who knows what's going to happen there? So you're going to have to continue to get 4 and 5 guys in the class and receiver and in the defensive backfield, because you just never know where those guys are going to play, and you need as many as you can, especially now when you bring in 5 or 6 every year, but you lose 2 or 3 every year, whether it's to the portal or to graduation or to the NFL.
Yeah, I like those 2 guys from DePaul Catholic. Obviously very competitive football there in New Jersey. And I think that Ohio State's done really well with guys from the East Coast in this recent run, this last decade, really. So I want to see that continue. You know, obviously, if you're pulling for Ohio State, I would think the other 2 guys they got over this weekend, both from Florida, Tarvis Alford, a linebacker from Vero Beach, and London Merritt from Bradenton IMG Academy, both outstanding prospects. Tarvis Alford, they worked really, really hard to land him, and they beat some really good schools for him as well. I think Tennessee was in there, Florida State, and Miami. All 3 were really high on his list, but James Laurinaitis closed the deal on Tarvis Alford, and he's one of the higher-ranked linebackers that Ohio State has recruited in recent memory. Number 53 overall, number 7 linebacker, and number 7 overall in the state of Florida, in the 6'2", 215 range, and can just run and make plays, has a good length as well, which is important as well. So I can't think of anything bad to say about Tarvis Alford other than, maybe he's a talent upgrade at linebacker for Ohio State, which has kind of struggled. CJ Hicks obviously was a top recruit there a few cycles ago as well. So now Sonny Styles is playing linebacker, although he was recruited as a defensive back. So, I think that Ohio State is back in the blue chip business at linebacker. And if somebody wants to pick it up and talk about London Merritt, I can lay out for a second on that if somebody has any special thoughts about him.
Yeah, London Merritt, originally out of Atlanta, Woodward Academy, a school that's produced a lot of talent through the years, transfers to IMG Academy for his final year. I think a lot of Ohio State fans were a little nervous when he made that move, because nobody really controls IMG Academy recruiting in terms of it is not a feeder school to Ohio State or to Alabama or to Georgia or to whoever. Players come from all over the nation to go to IMG, and then they kind of, are scattered into the wind. So you bring him there. Does he get around other players who talk up other schools? Well, he always seemed to be very much enamored with the idea of playing for Larry Johnson, playing at Ohio State. And the Buckeyes were able to maintain that. He's a very talented, player in his own right. And I saw him on the Saturday Student Appreciation Day, and I think he's gotten bigger since the last time I've seen him. I mean, he's listed at about 6'3", 250 according to these 247 rankings that Mark has up here right now. He's really starting to fill in, and I think he's going to be somebody who will see early playing time, especially with what I expect the roster to kind of look like for the 25 season, when you lose guys like JT and Jack, and you have guys like Kenyatta and Caden having to make decisions of, what their futures are going to be and things like that. So I think of the London Merritt, we can go through all 4 of these guys. I think in a lot of ways, just based on Ohio State missing its defensive end number the last 2 years, and not only missing it, but missing it badly. I think London Merritt may be the most important of the 4. That's not saying that I'm saying he's better than the other 3 or whatever, but I just think for roster continuity and the way that you build a team, I think that London Merritt commitment is the most important of the four.
So, Kevin, playing off something you said about Alford and Buckeye fans being a little bit nervous when he transitioned to high schools, I'm going to ask the age-old question about he and Merritt being Florida-connected guys, whether that's Vero Beach or that's IMG Academy, and, of course, players flocking from all over the country there. But that age-old question about Ohio State getting commits out of Florida.
Well, with Merritt, I mean, Merritt's the one who transferred. I mean, he's a Georgia kid in Florida, so I don't see him being loosey-goosey in terms of, oh, well, he's just a South Florida kid. You just don't know. He's going to play around with his process and everything else. I think London Merritt is pretty solid. And then when you look at TJ Alford, I think that, Vero is on the Atlantic side of the state, probably still, it's north of West Palm Beach. So we're really not in South Florida territory for, just what we like to talk about, but keep an eye on University of Florida. I think University of Florida really kind of was the team to beat at one point early on. It has been just an abject disaster in Gainesville as of late when it comes to recruiting and on-field performance and everything else. And is Billy Napier going to survive this season? If Florida puts together a good run this year, they're certainly going. Even if they put a bad run, they're going to keep on TJ Alford. But I think that if they put a good run together, it's something to watch. And I'm not trying to say somebody who just committed days ago is already on flip watch. But, I think that you would also be foolish not to be aware of where these potential pitfalls are coming from. But I don't think either of these guys are going to be playing the game per se as much as some others that we've seen in the past. But Ohio State always recruits the state of Florida well. Obviously that was the case under Jim Tressel. That was the case under Urban Meyer. Now continues to be the case under Ryan Day.
About a third of you watching out of 140 must be on Twitter or elsewhere. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please join us on YouTube. And Tony, did you say that one Dallan Hayden spoke to the media this week?
Mm-hmm.
My guy, I can't wait to hear what he had to say.
Well, he's not a man of many words. He's a pretty quiet guy and gives short answers, and talked about redshirting last year, and it was a mutual decision. And he saw it as a way forward for this year because of the guys they had last year. And then he was asked, well, do you still see that way forward? Did you still see that way forward when Quinshon Judkins announced that he was transferring and Travion Henderson announced that he was coming back? And he said, yeah, everything is fine. And I think what maybe we stress this, but I don't know how many people are hearing it. Everybody's going to play this year at every position because of the idea of 16 games. So the coaches are already talking about that. I asked James Laurinaitis about that. I've asked other coaches about that. That is something that they are already talking about and getting guys ready to play. Ryan Day talked about getting the young guys, the young defensive tackles, ready to play 25, 30 snaps early in the season so that the veterans are good to go in November, December, January when you need them. So I think with Hayden, it's really tough to get a third guy snaps at running back to get carries, especially when you've got a quarterback who is going to have 4 to 7 carries a game as well. But they just have to be really forceful in terms of, okay, Quinshon, Trey, you are both out this series, and we're going to run with Dallan. Like James Laurinaitis talked about how you kind of just get lost in it during a game, and they need to make sure that they are getting everybody in. But Dallan Hayden seems fine. I know everybody's like waiting for him to transfer. Everybody's waiting for him to transfer. One thing that Tony Alford did a pretty good job of is keeping the guys there. Mayan Williams, I think we waited for him to transfer every year of his career because Travion Henderson came in and supplanted him, but he stuck it out and until his 4th year when he left for the NFL. Chip Trainum leaves at the end of his career because he wants to go and finish out his career running the ball and not being a third guy. And, Evan Pryor just never happened for him. But Alfred did a good job of keeping guys that were going to play. He didn't have enough of them, which is one of the reasons he's gone now, and didn't have the contract extension. But Hayden seems fine. He did mention he's worked on fixing the his weaknesses, and he did mention, one of those weaknesses being pass protection, which is something that everybody has talked about as to why he doesn't play.
Steve, anything on the player interviews this week?
Well, let's see. I was there yesterday, and Quinshon Judkins was there. He said that he was well acquainted already, obviously, as we talked about, with the new running backs coach, Carlos Locklyn. We had Seth McLaughlin earlier in the week and just mentioned how happy he was to be at Ohio State after transferring from Alabama and doing things one way for 3 or 4 years, and now to do things the Buckeye way, this year, and that he was accepted right away. There was no, shunning of the new guys and all these other things. Safety Downs did an interview yesterday and just talked about how important it is to assimilate at Ohio State, play his best football, and win a championship. I mean, these are all the reasons why he came to Ohio State. So, yeah, everything you're hearing is very positive. I mean, midway through spring, there's less than 2 weeks to go to the spring game. Actually, it's a week from Saturday, 9 days away, and it's going to be televised on Fox Network, so the entire country will have a chance to see it. And everything seems to be pretty positive. We all got to attend the student appreciation practice last Saturday, and perhaps everybody wants to share some thoughts about what they saw there. It's one of the few practices we get to watch in the course of the spring, or really the entire year. And I would say the thing that I came away with was the pass protection is only marginally better than what they showed at this time last year. And last year it was just atrocious. So, there were just a lot of negative plays throughout the day. Some guys like Ty Hamilton and CJ Hicks and some really good defensive players really kind of stepped up, I thought. Mitchell Melton made a couple plays. So, yeah, to me, that was kind of my big takeaway from the whole week, was just what I saw there on Saturday. And, the quarterback position, those guys are a function of the offensive line. The offensive line probably not exactly where it needs to be just yet. And, I'll throw it open if those guys have anything they want to take either from the interviews or from the practice. But that was probably a little disconcerting to me. Made me kind of tap the brakes just a little bit about this whole thought that they're going to win it all this year.
I'll do a little from column A and a little from column B to get to a question I saw in there. Somebody talking about Dallan looking depressed. Dallan Hayden went and had a huge game. Where was it? Maryland? Really, pulled Ohio State's butt out of the fire. He was hard pressed to crack a smile even then. I just think that he is super chill and doesn't necessarily emote a lot, but I watched him talk too. He wasn't at my table, but I watched kind of the table, and I was like, boy, I think he's in like the dentist chair or something like that. He is not having a good time with all of this, but I think I'm going to chalk some of that up to just kind of who he is. To Steve's point about the offensive line, I do want to play counterpoint, and I always hate disagreeing with my boys here, but I'm going to disagree on this one, because if we're saying that Ohio State may have, well, I'm always disagreeing with you, Gerd. If we're saying that Ohio State may have the best defensive line in the nation, I really don't care what the offensive line is doing. If the defensive line is so great, it's going to whoop up on whoever it's playing. I also know a short run of plays that Steve is absolutely referring to, that we were all standing next to each other and we're like, ooh, that was something, where Ohio State was running plays from its own one, and in 4 plays, 3 safeties were recorded. Well, that was not a good situation to begin with. So you put what's going to be a strength of the team in the defensive line against a question mark of the team, which is the offensive line, and then you also put them in the shadow of their own goalpost, and it wasn't great. Now, I do agree that maybe we shouldn't be going out and getting fitted for, our fan version of the championship rings yet, because there's a lot of football left to be played. There are a lot of questions, but my big takeaway from the student appreciation practice is, stop me if you've heard this before, Jeremiah Smith is good. Jeremiah Smith made a couple of spectacular catches where I'm not going to say he completely silenced the entire Woody Hayes indoor facility, but the next best thing. And anybody who has been saying, well, it's all well and good that he is looking good in practice right now, but I'll believe he's going to be out there seeing significant playing time as a true freshman when I see it. You better start buying in on this guy, because it is 3 and done, and that first year is going to start immediately. He is just a different cat.
And the thing about Jeremiah is he would have made even more plays on Saturday if the passes were out in front of him, because he was by some defenders, and he would have to come back and then go get the ball and secure it. And the one pass that everybody has probably seen on Twitter where he's got Denzel Burke against him, watching it live, he kind of has to slow down and then pick up speed again, like while the ball is on its way down, and Denzel Burke is getting a little bit fooled by what Jeremiah Smith is doing. And yeah, he's very, very different. And everybody walked away. I was told the week before that his play on Saturday was one of the words used was breathtaking. And then Kevin says the place kind of goes silent on Saturday. It was breath, like, and then it's all like, oh my gosh. And then you see the pictures in the background, everybody just reacting to what they're seeing. So that was interesting. I thought Devin Brown had a really, really good day throwing the ball downfield. Bryson Rogers had a nice catch on a crosser and then outraced defenders, showing his speed. But back to Jeremiah Smith, but honestly, eventually we need to just leave him alone. But this is partly his fault for being outstanding right now. But just even out routes, he's snatching the ball and he's strong. And OSU just released a picture from Monday's practice yesterday, I think, or Wednesday's practice, and he's catching a touchdown on Calvin Simpson-Hunt, and he's just got huge hands. The ball's not going anywhere, and he's advanced. And so it's going to be fun to watch. I've that were a guaranteed starter this year, but then you talk to people throughout this winter and getting into closer towards spring, and then you talk to people who have been there throughout spring, and then you see it for yourself, and you're like, know how he doesn't start game one. And so I'm expecting Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith out there. Now, I saw somebody asking earlier today, is he going to be a 1,000-yard receiver? You're talking about 62.5 yards per game in a 16-game season, if that's what you're talking. You're thinking. The problem is you have Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate, who Caleb Downs labeled elite yesterday, labeled J.J. Smith elite. So I don't know that you can have enough. What would you do with the 55 catches you get? Maybe that's 1,000. But I think he's going to have a good shot. I've already predicted that he will do it, so I can't back off now. I didn't like my prediction when I said it, but I haven't seen anything from him lately to think, boy, I need to start going back the other way and trying to dial people down. I think we all still need to be careful. He's a true freshman, but he's not just any true freshman.
I think some of it is Brandon Inniss
yet either. I mean,
Brandon Inniss a little bit banged up.
Off season, so
yeah, Inniss wasn't there on Saturday. He was banged up a little bit. So how does he fit into this whole equation as well? You don't want him to get passed by just because he was hurt, but you do got to be out there to earn your spot too. So we'll see how that transpires, and maybe he'll be back out there for the last week and for the spring game. Hard to say. You just don't know. The quarterback position, I don't think that this scrimmage set up, as Kevin and I were talking yesterday, for what is Will Howard's strength, which is running the ball and throwing the ball. They weren't really allowing the quarterbacks to get hit. It wasn't tackle. So, like, if he breaks contain and gets loose, they give him 3 or 4 yards, move the ball up 3 or 4 yards, and, run the next play. So that's, he did break loose for a touchdown in the red zone, but, was it a real touchdown? I don't know. So, but I did think Devin Brown performed pretty well. I thought Lincoln Kienholz made an amazing throw down the middle of the field to Jelani Thurman into triple coverage almost. Put it where only his guy could get it. It had to be a 30-yard gain. And that was an amazing throw by Lincoln Kienholz. So he's got some real ability, folks. And is he ever going to get to play at Ohio State? I don't know. To me, the young freshmen look like freshmen. And I think it's hard to predict or project that one of them is going to start this season unless it's out of complete necessity. Maybe a couple of the other guys have transferred out and somebody gets hurt, then maybe they would have to start. But I just didn't see it in what I saw on Saturday. I saw a lot of passes that were they were strong balls, but not exactly where they needed to be, if that makes sense. So, I guess I would say that Howard and Brown are a little bit more polished, a little bit more professional at this point. Not meaning they're NFL quarterbacks, just professional college quarterbacks at this point, just a little more polished than those younger guys, but they've got tremendous ability as well. And I'm interested to see how it all shakes out. How do you keep 5 guys happy? I'm not sure that you do. So we'll see where this looks like in about 2 weeks when the portal opens and if anybody falls into it.
I want to jump on something, and Tony answered in the chat too. Mika Hanna asking about Aaron Noland. Aaron Noland did go through some of the drill work, but they were only running 4 quarterbacks in 7-on-7 and 11-on-11, and Air was not one of them. I think at some point it's hard to run with 5 quarterbacks. There's a reason why teams don't necessarily carry 5. And when you're practicing indoors and you're not running multiple fields, something has got to give. Now, does that mean that Ohio State is already, between the 2 true freshmen has already ranked them? No, I just think it was a case of that. It was probably something where they just felt that it was going to be more important for Julian to get those reps in the 7-on-7 and the 11-on-11 work. But, we saw Aaron Noland to practice yesterday. After practice, they bring us in once practice is done, but a lot of times players are there still putting in a little extra work or whatever. There was, there were a lot of kids that were there. Devin Jordan has a program called Guys with Ties, which are a bunch of 3rd graders who, it's teaching them life skills and how to grow up to be, great young men and everything. They were there shaking hands with players and everything else. But there's no change in status with Aaron Noland. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't missing or anything like that. It was, a DMP coach's decision.
You guys are saying all this about Jeremiah Smith. And if I'm not mistaken, you guys have seen some decent wide receiver play in practice over the last several seasons. Like, you're not comparing this against the Iowa wide receiver room that you've been having to watch over the last several seasons. Guys have seen a few good ones.
The one that I always judge is when I talk about too much, and people probably sick of me hearing about it, is Jackson Smith-Njigba. The first spring practice we got to see in March of 2020 before spring practice was canceled. And he caught everything except for one pass, a deep shot down the sideline that was in coverage, and he came down with it and just lost it as he went to the ground. Other than that, he was outstanding, and it was incredible, and it was a sight to behold. And you knew right then, this guy is going to be special. And he went out that season in 2020 and had 10 catches for 49 yards. Now, the next year, he showed us everything that we had seen. Garrett Wilson, watching him spring as a true freshman, outstanding, blew me away. That was legit. And he came out that season and had, 30 catches for like 400 and some yards. This was still another level above that. And this was somebody who looked like the best receiver on the team. Like he from what I've been told, he's been the most targeted guy in the spring. Now, some of that is because Emeka isn't practicing as much because he doesn't need to. Brandon Innes has been dinged up. Cornell Tate doesn't need to practice as much, even though he's still just a young guy. So they're rolling through guys, but it's, it is, you can watch him and he will stand out. And now what does that mean? Again, if I have my freshman wide receiver history, yeah, my chart here, I always have it. So over the last 40 years and probably beyond then, because freshmen weren't really catching the ball before Chris Carter leads with 41 catches for Ohio State freshman receiver all time, 41 catches, 648 yards, 8 touchdowns. Those are all freshman records at Ohio State for wide receivers. The next is David Boston with 33 for 450 and 7. Only 5 guys in the last 40 years have caught more than 15 passes as true freshmen at Ohio State in terms of wide receivers. Cornell Tate was the 5th last year. So this is not something that happens at Ohio State a lot, where freshmen come in and just are a real part of the offense. And Garrett Wilson got into the rotation partly because he is so good, but partly because the rest of the receivers weren't as great. You're talking about guys that he was playing with where maybe Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell are the only NFL guys at this point. So this is a pretty good receiver room for Jeremiah Smith. And it's not overly deep. So he's going to be in the rotation. He would be in the rotation pretty much, not necessarily automatically because he is a true freshman, but it's different. And I'll stop talking because I've talked about it enough, but it's different than what I've seen from other true freshmen.
I'll just, I guess just to bring it to a point, I mean, we certainly have seen some great guys come through. We've seen some guys that have gone on to have miraculous careers at Ohio State, just huge numbers, but have not contributed as a freshman just due to the logjam or whatever. Well, Jeremiah Smith is that icebreaker out there, breaking through everything and getting into calm waters, because he's going to be somebody who's absolutely going to be part of this system. And I think you look at Ohio State brings in Chip Kelly. There's not necessarily going to be a situation of where guys are, okay, you've been here 3 years. I have a history with you. I'm going to try and force the ball into you as much as I can. Chip Kelly is he's here to put up points and yards and everything else like that. And if Jeremiah Smith is going to be able to be the guy that's going to be there, he's going to have a lot of plays drawn up for him. Obviously it's going to come down to whoever the quarterback is, making it through progressions. Everything else is going to be up to the line to sit there and hold and be able to allow routes to be run and things like that. But Jeremiah Smith absolutely is going to rewrite the Ohio State freshman record book without a doubt in my mind. I know in Ohio we no longer have player prop bets anymore, but I'm willing to talk to Shohei Ohtani's guy and put a lot of money down on Jeremiah.
Or just Shohei Ohtani.
Hey, I'm the Dodger fan. He's my guy. I can say that. I'm willing to push my chips all in on Jeremiah.
I want to throw in on the running backs. Great play by Chip Kelly to use the defense's over-exuberance of getting into the backfield against them. Ran a play fake. I don't remember which quarterback. It might have been Howard. Ran a play fake and got Quinshon Judkins on the circle route coming out into the left flat and just kind of dinked it over the defense, and there was nobody there. And he hauled it in, and our photographer, Dan Harker, was in the end zone, and he took off like 60, 70 yards for a touchdown. And in the background, the offensive players that aren't in are kind of milled around on the sideline or behind the offensive set. Here's Travion Henderson. As soon as he's catching this ball in his turned up field, Quinshon Judkins is gone. In the backfield, Henderson's giving it this, with a big smile, knowing that his guy, Quinshon Judkins, his guy he's splitting carries with and splitting work with, is gone. And I got to tell you, that was pretty cool to see that picture and see that play, because it illustrates that now you got 2 game breakers. Judkins can take it to the house at any moment. It was also a sense of consternation, I think, for Jim Knowles and Matt Guerrieri and James Laurinaitis and Tim Walton. Like, where the hell was the defense? Like, where were the linebackers, the safeties, and the corners on that play? And it, again, just kind of speaks to Chip Kelly's brilliance that he came up with something to counter what they were doing. I don't want to say he played the play, but had something in his arsenal that, okay, you guys are going to sell out to try and get in the backfield. Here you go. Have a little of this today, because certainly Michigan, Penn State, whoever is going to do that against Ohio State's defense if they get a little too heavy one way or the other. So I forget which player it was. May have been Hicks or Styles or somebody. I don't know that they were the player in on that play, or maybe it was one of the backup linebackers. But Laurinaitis was like nonplussed by that whole situation with the running back coming out of the backfield and going forever. So that was a pretty cool play, in my opinion.
I want to jump in really quick on make a hard right turn right here to Mika asking about Calvin Simpson-Hunt. You got to remember that you have a secondary that is full of veterans, so you're not going to hear as much about some of the twos at this point, and I definitely have Calvin Simpson-Hunt in the twos. It's going to be a long season. Guys are going to see playing time. Let's not forget, if I remember right, Calvin Simpson-Hunt was not an early enrollee last year. Right. He was a summer enrollee, so this is his first spring, so it's still very early in the game. So Mika had mentioned, I hope he doesn't go to the portal. You're going to have to put in your dues anywhere that you go, really, if you're going to play at a high level. You could go to, backwater state somewhere and walk right in and start and be on a really crappy team. So, there's going to be a level of patience, and I think it's incumbent upon the Ohio State coaches on both sides of the ball to make sure that you are rotating enough to get some of your young guys in for a multitude of reasons. One of them being keeping guys engaged and keeping guys out of the portal. Two, so when you get to the end of this 24 season and everybody and their uncle leaves because they're out of eligibility, draft eligible junior, whatever, we're not having conversations on Ohio State Buckeyes football 315 or whatever episode that's going to be about this team doesn't have any experience. So I wouldn't worry too much about Calvin Simpson-Hunt or some of these other guys. There are guys buried further on depth charts at other positions that, I might be keeping an eye on after spring practice, but Calvin Simpson-Hunt is not one of them.
Yeah, he's redshirt freshman, came in on time last year, which is late, so not concerned about him. And just keep in mind, Ohio State started 4 cornerbacks last year due to injuries, started 5 the year before due to injuries. Denzel Burke hasn't made it through a season completely healthy since his freshman season. And I'm also not convinced that there won't be times where you're giving the game off. You're not going to play this week against Indiana. This will be Jermaine Matthews and Davison Igbinosun, and the next week it'll be Denzel Burke and Calvin Simpson-Hunt, and Jermaine Matthews will be in the slot or something like that. I think you'll see some of that moving forward. I call it the LeBronization of football, where I can't be expected to play every game. It's hard out here. So I think you'll see some of that there. And in terms of back to the wheel route from Quinshon Judkins, to me, if you watch that again, you'll see Mitchell Melton start to get into the backfield and apparently realizes that should have been his guy because he peels back. But asking defensive end Mitchell Melton to handle Quinshon Judkins is not a winning proposition. And that's not – you can't ask Joey Bosa to do that.
No.
On a wheel route.
No. We have footage of it on our YouTube channel of that wheel. That was something that actually stayed in focus on the camera and everything else. And it was, it It was very impressive, and just has me ready. I'm not willing to sacrifice my summer, but I am ready to see meaningful football, because I think this is going to be a very fun team to watch.
Ironically, LeBron may have set a modern NBA playoff and championship series record in those games against the Warriors, because they didn't take him off the court for more than like 3 seconds, because they couldn't against that team.
No.
He was playing like every second of those series. But
LeBron
then he quickly kicked into Tuesdays or day off weeks or whatever it was. Chris Carter, by the way, 32 catches in the regular season, had a big Rose Bowl with 9 receptions when the Buckeyes threw for 403, but lost to USC in that one. Also of note,
would that have been 11-game regular season or 10 back then?
That was 11. Right? 9-2, yeah. And to Steve's point about Chip Kelly's play calling, maybe Chip Kelly is the guy that keeps Jeremiah Smith under 1,000 yards by way of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson.
Yeah, like Dean Smith keeping Michael Jordan under 20.
That's it.
Exactly. Especially when he can use them as pass receivers like that as well. Mm-hmm. There are some Iowa outlets out there, I'm not going to speak to their legitimacy, that seem to really like Lincoln Kienholz as well for Iowa City as a destination.
I think a lot of people should. He had the 2 best throws of Saturday until Devin Brown started hitting some deep stuff, because he also had a deep one to Jeremiah Smith with Jermaine Matthews in coverage, where Jeremiah went up and caught it over Matthews and then broke the tackle and ran the final 40 yards into the end zone. But I was impressed. And Lincoln can also run the ball, 3,000-yard rusher in high school, like a 10,000-yard passer. So all-state baseball, all-state basketball. And, he's the rich man's Drew Tate, if you will.
Just precious that Iowa thinks it has a functioning offense that it could bring in like a real quarterback to do anything. I know Brian Ferentz is now selling Runza somewhere in Nebraska or whatever the hell he's doing, but come on, Iowa, know your role. Defense, I'll give you all the credit in the world, but until I see it on offense, you need to go just sit over there in the corner.
I gathered up some other amazing Iowa offensive stats this week. Worst Big Ten yardage output for a team since guess when?
1935.
1984.
Northwestern in the 70s.
84 was the last time a Big Ten. I don't know which Big Ten. It was probably Northwestern.
Yeah,
had a worse yardage figure. Also shut out 3 times for the first time since 1972.
That's bad. I always say bad offense is on purpose in college, because Northwestern is an example of from the 90s and 2000s. You can scheme up good offense with average players. You have to be purposefully bad on offense, and to be that bad, you really have to work hard at it.
Has Brian Ferentz found a job anywhere?
Runza.
Yeah. There you go.
No, I don't know. I mean, the problem is that Kirk has a couple of kids or whatever, and like James Ferentz, I think he went to like the Patriots or something, or Brian, I mean, seriously, might be sweeping up floors at Runza for all I know.
Actually, I believe it's Punza.
Punza.
Good night, everybody.
Tip your servers on the way out. Come back for the 10 o'clock show. It'll be a little more blue.
And with that, Kevin, we'll ask you what you're up to this week.
I have no idea. No, I will be doing a live show on Friday. We did a live show on Tuesday. Had a lot of good questions about recruiting. I think that we will, as James Locklyn has offered a couple more running backs, I'm sure there'll be questions about what Ohio State's plan at running back is going to be. So we'll cover that among some other things. Just really looking forward to getting into the spring game, and I'm trying to talk Tom and Tony into maybe doing some sort of pre-spring game, hungry huddle, something local, something cheap, something iconic. We'll figure that one out. There's a certain pizza place on campus that maybe we could sit there and figure out to do. I don't think that we would get that expense kicked back to us or anything else. So keep it locked in to Buckeye Huddle and youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle.
Tony.
Going to be doing a Buckeye Weekly episode today on the suggestion or the plan being put in place, or this group of people coming together in college football to make it an 80-team league with relegation from the bottom 10. So I'm going to read up a little bit more on that. And so we'll be talking about that today. I'm writing a story on Caleb Downs right now from our conversation with him. And I've got to write up a story on James Peoples, who was also really impressive, in my opinion, on Saturday. Talked with his high school coach, so I've got a story I'll probably write, hopefully for tomorrow, that I've been kicking down the road. So just a ton of really good stuff from his high school coach about James Peoples. I think Buckeye fans will enjoy that one. It's kind of the exact kind of kid you want in your program.
Steve, what's going on at Bucknuts?
Well, a lot of football stuff, obviously, leading up to the spring game next Saturday. We'll have a ton of content every day on our site, just looking at the players and developments throughout the spring. So that's important. Also, keeping one eye on the OSU basketball program. Some people brought that up in the chat about Roddy Gale, one of the so-called big three, entering the transfer portal. And that's a big blow, obviously, I think, for Jake Diebler, although they're getting Michi Johnson back from South Carolina. So that's kind of a neat thing, I suppose. But, just a lot of off-season developments in basketball. And, I'm trying not to get too demoralized by this college athletics model right now, with the transient nature of everything and the money that it's kind of created, I guess, these kind of things. It was interesting. I was reading a tweet that these college players who don't go to the NFL could make $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year as a starter at a Power 5 college team, not make the NFL, and then have to go into the public sector, private sector, go find a 9-to-5 job somewhere making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year starting out. And what a culture shock that's going to be for those guys to, it used to be that if you didn't make the NFL, at least you could probably fall back on your degree and get a teaching job, or, go to work at Nationwide Insurance or whatever and make $60,000, $70,000 and be happy. Now you're going to get that job and be depressed because it's a huge pay cut from the 100, 150, 200 that you were making as a starter at a Power 5 school. So, and we're seeing, some bidding wars for some of these top prospects in football and basketball also kind of coming to the forefront as well. And where's the truth really lie? We don't know. So people come to us for answers to questions that 5 years ago we couldn't have even fathomed. So, it's kind of that's what makes what we're doing right now so challenging to me, is just none of this has ever happened before. And people expect you to know, well, what's going to happen with this? Well, I can't predict. I can't predict who's going to offer who what and what the next step in this whole thing's going to be.
That's not the way the game's played, though, Steve. You make a prediction, you sell it like there's no way it's not going to happen, and some portion of people on YouTube will believe it and watch it.
I've been out there on those limbs before when they've been sawed off behind me, so I'm not real excited about that. So I don't know.
Take down the voice of college football. I answer trivia questions against you. That's coming up immediately on our Big 12 channel. And I'm telling you, I've got less names and stats in my head than I ever have. So this is the time to take me down. It's all leaving. So I'm sure you can beat me at trivia. So join us here in about 5 minutes. All right, guys, appreciate it. Steve, Kevin, and Tony, they're the best. Track them on their various platforms, and we'll see you next week.
Go win Mark's money.